Good evening and welcome to this, our 10th episode of the South African Equestrian Federation podcast. I'm just going to pause it before it starts playing here. From the horse's mouth, tonight we are discussing saddling up for success. How important the saddle is, how its fit can affect both the horse and the rider, and what you as the owner/rider needs to know about it, hopefully. In studio, we have joining us Claire Jurgens from Saddle Solutions, independent saddle fitter, and another independent saddle fitter now retired at the grand old age of what I will not say is Siobhan Records. Thank you both for joining us here today in the studio.
Thank you for having us, Georgie.
This is just a reminder to everyone who is listening that please turf all your questions into the live chat here so that I can throw them at these two lovely ladies and make them earn their keep tonight. That would be fantastic. Just to kick things off, I think let's start off with how important is the saddle fit, not only for the horse. I think we're used to that. Everyone's very aware that it's important for the horse, but how important is it for riders?
To be honest, you've got to have the combination of the rider and the horse. If your rider is not happy, if it's not comfortable, if you are not fitted in the correct size, shape, model, you can also affect how your horse goes and how your saddle feels.
Yeah.
So basically, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the rider's interface with the saddle and the horse is of fundamental importance. So if you are not correctly balanced and sitting in your saddle, you will influence the fit. So it doesn't matter how well we do our jobs in terms of saddle fit, you will do something to the fit if you're not balanced.
So not only it's actually a case of you can't just fit a saddle to a horse, the rider's not there.
Yeah.
You fit the saddle. It's essential in an ideal world that you buy a saddle that fits
we
both.
would love when we fit a saddle to have the rider there, to have the coach there, to have the horse clean, ideally. Well presented.
Mud not good for saddle fitting?
No, not ideal. Rain is not good either. But please may it come to Kailami. We're in desperate need.
Yeah.
But
people are drowning in Alberton, by the way. But
it's Alberton. It's fine.
So, how does the rider affect then the fit of the saddle? Is it purely a weight thing?
No. So I think
also ability.
Yeah.
If you're not experienced enough riding in a saddle that is maybe got too big a knee roll or doesn't give you enough support, you can become very unbalanced. Already being an unbalanced rider naturally. Maybe you started out or you're progressing up the levels, which then can also make you feel uncomfortable, make your saddle necessarily not do what it should do.
And how much can riders is it long-term damage that riders can do to their own saddles, like twisting trees, or is it flocking? Is it both?
To a degree, yes and no. There is a body, the Saddle Research Trust.
Oh, that's interesting.
That there are a lot of top professionals in the UK involved in, including a lot of top vets that do research every year and then at a symposium present. And then they detail their findings. And a lot of what they found is how riders can influence the saddle. So basically, in one of their research papers, they took 3 differently proportioned riders and put them in the same saddle. And then...
So when you talk about differently proportioned, it's like I could be the same height as you, but I've got a shorter waist or a longer femur, or
you've got height and weight in your bum.
Oh, okay.
So height and weight
as well. Your hip plays a big part. Your angle,
the mechanics,
of your hip.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you've got scoliosis, if you are skew, if you have a problem with one of your joints, versus someone else who isn't.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So what they did is they put all these riders on a pliance system, which are sensors that they place under the saddle, and then they measured the variables and the differential and the weight.
Do we have a system like that in South Africa?
No, we are very much trying to get the system in here for riding and testing.
Okay.
It's just not cheap. So if anyone would like to donate to the cause, it comes in pounds.
Yeah. And it's not cheap in pounds either, I'm sure.
No, sadly not.
So when we're talking about saddle buying and everything, obviously in an ideal world, the best thing, the Grand Prix of everything, I suppose, is getting a saddle made for you and your horse.
Yes and no. I think there's a lot of off-the-shelf products that will cater to a wide variety. But I think we've got to take it a step back, in all honesty, and we've got to look at the basics of the horse and how the horse is put together first before we jump step to finding a saddle for it.
So what are the things that the owners / rider, because I know that they're not always the same person, what should they be looking for? Someone's coming, they're choosing a saddle.
Go step back, George.
Go step back. Do you want to talk about
yeah.
your horses? Okay.
Yeah.
Siobhan's brought pieces of horse.
Siobhan found skeletons in her closet.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so these are neck vertebrae of a horse. Obviously, they are somewhat similar looking to what you would perceive a vertebra to look like in a joint. As you can see, they fit into each other like that, and the ligaments run through. But the next thing, and I think the most interesting thing for most riders,
So that's purely in the neck from
That's purely
the
in the
pole
neck.
down, and it actually inserts basically in the skeleton in the bottom between the pecs almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And different sizing as you
these are thoracic vertebrae. So these are actually what we are sitting on. So most people perceive these lower parts of the spine, the facets, as what we're sitting on. But the processes actually reach up like that.
So is that a wither that we're looking at?
So it's T6-7. So
So it's
towards
actually
the end
right
of the wither.
under the saddle.
Towards the start of the saddle,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
So as you can see, they obviously join in slightly, and then you've got your nuchal ligament running through as well, which runs from the pole to the tail. So it's just as
So
a
show us
point-
some kissing spines quickly, Siobhan.
Okay, so,
And just hold those up and then just show us where the ribs, I suppose you'll
so the
put them
ribs
easier.
actually you can
Yeah.
see on those 2 points pop out there.
Okay.
So a lot of people think they're sitting on the ribs, but we're not. We're sitting on these vertebrae, and they fundamentally, to a larger or lesser extent, look like this throughout the extent of the spine. And then we come along to the lumbar vertebra, and these are the vertebrae we don't have a saddle sitting on because our
Hopefully.
saddles fit, hopefully. Depending, again, so we're going to clarify here, we're talking about English saddles, not
Okay,
necessarily
yes.
Western saddles. So these are the lumbar vertebra, and then they look like that.
Okay.
And you can
Shorter
see
breast.
actually with these two that they
Yeah,
have
are they? Yeah.
touched
Yeah.
a little. So that is a little bit of kissing going on there.
Okay. So
So that's what we
besides
start with
the skeleton. Okay.
And then the muscle on top
And then
of
we get
that.
onto the muscles. And the muscles are massively complex. There are chains, they're interlinked.
Groups.
They
And just to be
operate in-
clear, these could look different to a degree in every horse.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Like humans. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully no breaks or fractures.
Yeah. But it's it's horses.
You know.
Definitely in the humans.
So basically, we then land up with our ligaments, our tendons, and then into our muscle groups.
Okay.
And they all interlink and they all interchange. So there's a really good website, The Horse Inside Out, which is Gillian Higgins.
Gillian Higgins, yeah. She
She
came
is-
out here and actually did
Yes,
a
she did.
wonderful.
I know she used some of the Lipizzaners, and I also
Yes.
looked at them doing the Lavard and everything in
Yes.
terms of...
So Gillian Higgins, she actually, and I would recommend everyone goes and has a look. She drew the skeleton on one horse, the muscles on another horse, and really gave everyone an opportunity to see.
Yeah.
It makes you ride so you can see what your bones, muscles
Yeah.
are doing under the saddle.
Yeah.
And I think she's really great in the sense she explains how the chains interconnect.
Yes.
And then she's got a lot of webinars in terms of how she breaks it down.
Yeah.
And that's really, really amazing because fundamentally, like if you look under the saddle and in the back, you've got the cutaneous muscle, trapezius muscle, the latissimus, the abdominal, the pectoral, the dorsal serrate, the ventral serrate. And those are just some of the chains that are in function when you are on the saddle and in the horse's back. when you're working.
And I'm sure if you're just affecting one of those, everything else, there is
Yes.
this chain reaction that just, really knocks on.
And that's where saddle fitting's really interesting. And I think as saddle fitters, we have such a fascinating job because we are fundamentally a little bit of a jack of all trades.
No, you're having to.
You've got to know a little bit of the
veterinary
skeletal,
knowledge,
You've got to know
bit
a
of
little bit
biomechanical.
of the muscle, 100%.
Because
What
it
you
all
see,
impacts.
Yeah, what you see, what you go, oh, your horse should not be moving like that, or it shouldn't be reacting like that,
Yeah.
and it all comes
And then
back-
looking at the human.
Yes.
Yeah.
And going, oh, well, this works great for your horse, but it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
Back to the drawing board.
So I think that's where it gets really, really interesting because obviously when we're fitting a saddle, we're dealing with the biomechanic of both the horse and the rider together. So if there's an issue in the biomechanic of one or the other, it's going to impact on the
So
saddle
do you see less saddle fitting issues in with professionals in the saddle?
Fundamentally, yes.
Okay.
From my side, definitely.
Well, they get regular checks as well. They have a great maintenance system, which I think if
I
you
think they're like the cobbler's children.
I can't tell you how many yards I've been in, and it's just like, just take that saddle off that, put it on that. Maybe it needs a pad. But I think also they're probably conditioning their horses really well. You know, they maybe
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, you know, and I think leading into that is what we ask when we saddle fit and why.
yes.
You know, so
what is
there
our
are some
goal? Yeah.
fundamentals that we ask. And I mean, it's silly things from the horse's name to its age. We detail in the markings for our own
Injuries.
reference. When you purchase the horse,
Who your vet is.
did it have a vetting? Were
Yeah.
there any issues? Has it been injured recently? And all of that plays an integral role into what we do, because obviously if it's coming back from an injury, it's going to
change.
Also, how often do you ride?
Yes.
What do you feed your horse?
Oh, that's
How
a great
often?
point.
Yeah, exactly.
And what are you planning on doing? I think that's actually a really interesting question.
Who your
you know,
coaches? Do you plan
but
to
sometimes you go
be
there
a
and you're
happy
like,
hacker?
we're going to give you this amazing, and they go, I just want to go around the block.
Once
I'd like
a week.
I'd like to maybe go on a hunt. Okay, maybe not a knee block,
Yeah.
straight cut dressage saddle.
Yeah.
You know?
Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
You try that.
I feel much safer personally in a deep dressage saddle. I'm like, I'll go hunting
Until
again.
they're back.
That's first time.
And then you're like, yeah, it's okay.
No, the worst is when you have to get out of it in a hurry and you can't. You're like, I live here now.
Yes.
This is where I die.
Okay, now I don't find that. I don't find dressage saddles comfortable.
And so again,
Isn't
this
that
is
a
the
great
exact point.
example?
But that I know
Yeah.
it comes back to my conformation. My hips are too far forward; they don't come out. I've got
That's interesting.
scoliosis, and so whatever I sit in, I'm just like,
But that's great. It's lovely. There's also that is it called Balance in Motion? It's a great book where it takes and throughout the book there at one stage there are 5 riders in the book and they draw a line through all of the riders' shoulders, through all of their hips, through all of their knees, through all the lines are different.
Now I'm going
And
to
you-
sit straight because I
and
have
you-
my physio's watching me. I'm going to get
But it's
yelled at.
really interesting. It's bearing that in mind.
So
Okay.
fundamentally, those are the questions we ask, because then we know where you're going and what you want to do and why. The importance of this all is the why of it.
Yeah.
You know, why do we saddle fit? For the comfort of the rider and the comfort of the horse. We want a happy athlete combination.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, combination. And so often we just focus on one or the other.
And then basically, I think as fitters, what we go on to do, the next step after that is we look at the horse's conformation.
it's a big one.
Its posture, how it's standing. Is it standing well? Is it standing poorly? Because that gives us an indication as to how it's working. And then we look at things like, does it have a big wither? Does it have a small wither? Does it have a short back? Does it have a long back?
Is it well covered? Like general weight, muscle. That also plays a role. And then you can ask, okay, I see your horse isn't as well covered as maybe it could be. Was there a problem? Oh yeah, I just came out of colic situation or
okay.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, then you can divulge into maybe a maintenance plan or a rehab plan.
No, I'm going to have to come in 6 weeks and
I
check
have
it,
to
not
have-
3 months.
Exactly.
You
So
know,
what?
And
Yeah.
I think that's it going forward. And then what the next step we normally do is we look at the horse in motion.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we take them through
Before being ridden.
Before being ridden, in hand.
Yeah.
Pretty
Oh, that's
much
interesting.
the showing
Okay.
triangle.
Yeah.
So they walk away from us, they run across, or they walk
Yeah.
across, and then they come back towards us. So we can watch how the pelvis and the hips and the back are moving away from us, side on, looking at how the back is moving, and then towards us, seeing what the front end is moving. Because obviously, if they're, as an example, dishing, the leg is swinging out, it's going to affect higher up. It runs up, it's a chain. It's a
Well,
chain
not only
reaction.
that, I mean, I think also about, you get those school ponies that move like Pepe Le Pews. So their bodies are rigid and the legs just go underneath them,
Georgina has
whatever they're
mastered
doing.
the look in her face of Pepe Le Pew.
Ridden so many Pepe Le Pews. As opposed to those really athletic, like panther horses,
Striding
it's
out.
gonna,
And you get some that fundamentally you look at them walk out and you're like, oh. I mean, I had a Priest of George horse that used to walk out like a moke, a complete moke, like a donkey. And then it would trot and it would suddenly go,
Yeah.
and you'd be like, oh, it's a dressage horse.
Yeah. Thank God.
So and then we look at them in trot.
Yeah.
So we can see how they move and we can see what they're doing with their bodies, because again, we need to assess that from the ground before we do a fit.
Because obviously the rider will then change. how
Bring
the
their own
horse moves.
things. That's really interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting. I think about the amounts of times that I've sat in for a saddle fitting instead of the owner.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, that's where it gets really important. So, I mean, being 5'2"
Yeah.
on a good day.
You get bigger days.
I do. 6 inches.
Yeah.
So,
And that's how I got fired.
so often, like when I'm riding for like smaller children and that and schooling ponies, they weigh 20 kilos. I weigh
More.
more. Thank you, Georgie, for a good opt-out. So I weigh more. So my weight influence is going to affect the saddle
And the horse.
Yeah.
and the horse. So we have to then customize the fit a little bit
Okay.
for their weight and my weight.
As well as your ability.
Yes.
The child might only be able to do a basic walk, trot, canter.
Yeah.
Whereas you might be able to get a pre-St. George out of the pony. Do you know what I mean?
Love confidence.
We do have a question here, which I think we were going to touch on too, from Gillian, who says, is the rider's weight taken into consideration when doing a saddle fitting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we take into consideration actually the gender of the rider,
Okay.
male versus female, obviously.
And does that have to do with the narrowness and the wideness of the pelvis?
Yes. So generally speaking, the pelvis in men is a little straighter, pointing straight down. Women's is a little more cusped because obviously,
Childbirth
well, you
reasons.
guys procreate, not me. So
My pelvis had no parts to play in that. It came out the sunroof.
because you
Mine
have a
too.
titanium
Yeah,
hip.
there we go. Yeah.
So there is an influence in that in terms of the way we sit as men versus women. I mean, I think if you look at the way the guys sit in the Spanish
And also
riding
the
school,
width
they
of
are
the-
Yes.
pinned
Ram
in
rod.
straight barrel.
Yeah.
You know, and
interesting.
women can't sit like that because then we get an anterior tilt.
Yes.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay.
You know, so that is a factor. First up, gender. Again, it plays a role, but not always the biggest role because again, we are all differently
Yes.
shaped.
Okay.
And then it comes down to height because a lot of saddles. So we're gonna jump ahead to jump back. A lot
And
of
not just height as in you're standing, as in
Your female
hip
length.
to knee.
Okay.
And that's how a lot of saddles length is determined, i.e. if it's a 15, 16, 17.
So let's
18.
just put
Or
a pin in
forward
this.
cut,
Yes.
Or a short
How do we
cut.
define size in saddles? So we
Every
talk. We
saddle
talk.
has a different way of measuring.
Okay. So
But
you.
rider size, if we go into
Oh,
rider size.
right.
No. So both, because I mean, like you get people who say it's a 17-inch medium. You know.
Okay, so a
and-
17-inch will refer to the rider size. Inch always refers to the rider size.
okay.
And generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, that is on a rider point of buttock to point of knee.
Okay.
And it's that bone length that will determine a lot of the time, particularly in the jumping saddles. And then obviously in the jumping, you can get a 17-inch and you can get a +1, 2, 3
And a short, long flap sometimes.
in the
depending-
dressage.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
it's not complicated at all.
That's not. It just gets harder.
Yes.
Different knee
So
rolls.
when you're measuring on a saddle, and I had this as an interesting thing the other day. One of my clients tried a customized saddle.
Yes.
And when you go onto the website, I think it might have been a Henning. I'm not sure, Henning.
Yeah, they're generally bespoke made.
Yes, and they were saying you had to measure from here to here. Yeah, I can't remember where it was.
So generally,
So if-
there is a button that is on the point of the tree, and you measure to the center of the cantle.
Okay, so that's how people will know
As a
how
rule of
many
thumb.
That's the
inches.
rule of thumb.
Okay,
Yeah, because then you
My
do
thumb's
get
that big.
and what are you actually measuring there? Is that the tree of the saddle? or?
that's 17.
Okay,
So that's what
but
makes
is that
them,
the
but they will often measure it in relation to the flap and how they make the
Okay.
flap onto the saddle.
okay.
And then obviously,
this is very unhelpful. I'm just telling
Sorry.
you.
delighted, delighted.
Okay, so people have to bear that. I think that's really interesting.
And again,
They have to-
every manufacturer will have a little tweak. Like there are certain manufacturers that do not make half sizes.
Correct.
okay,
But people will move the tape measure accordingly to find a half inch.
So to get it
Okay.
a half an inch shorter, they'll go pommel to cancel.
Yes.
okay,
Not
not button to or
button.
wherever.
But
okay.
again, the fundamental is how you as the rider fit in it.
and also how that fits your horse.
And then when you talk about the width of the saddle, is that the gullet?
So again, yes, but each manufacturer will measure it slightly differently. And each manufacturer has its own range of colors. I'm really aiming for like a standardized
A
rainbow, yeah?
universal.
And also each saddle has a different way that they measure. So they measure this part, whereas some will measure the top. So if you've got the top like that,
Yeah.
right? Some will measure this angle.
Okay. So
Like
this is a gullet.
Right.
So some manufacturers will measure the width there to there.
Okay.
Some will measure it there to there. And some will call it a 29, 30, 31, 32. and some
Medium,
will call it
wide.
medium, wide,
Okay.
extra wide.
Okay.
So it will vary, and then they all come in different colors and different shapes
And length.
and lengths.
And how much adjustability, I mean, can you get with changing a gullet from an extra narrow to an extra wide? I mean, that's...
Okay, so it's a broad question. So some saddles are not adjustable.
Okay.
Some saddles
That's a
have what we
good
call a
starting
fixed tree.
point.
Like let's start at the very beginning.
What can trees be? So trees are the skeleton of the saddle?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Good phrasing.
Okay.
Good phrasing.
And you add then the panel underneath, which combines the tree, the horse, rider.
And the tree you can't change, can you change it?
On some saddles you can, and
The front of the tree.
it
the
depends
part of the
depends
tree.
on the saddle. There are one or two that will alter further down.
On
as well.
purpose? Oh, okay.
On
Yes.
purpose. So those are more trees that are done with carbon fiber.
Okay.
So what you've got to remember is the horse's spine carries on throughout. So if it expands in the front, you can adjust that, but you always have to check the fit through the center.
Okay.
And that's often where we struggle.
Okay. Okay. So you want to also make sure that, so let's go from there on to, we've discussed what horses can look like, what saddles can look like.
So I think let's go on to next how we measure.
Yes.
So interestingly enough, Dr. David Marlin, fantastic page to look at in terms of anything
Yeah, that's
equine.
really, yeah.
And solid science-based fact, in all honesty.
He's got nice dissections and things on there.
Yeah,
It's
he
really good.
doesn't give much.
Yeah.
I'm trying, Georgie.
He doesn't give much.
So fundamentally with him, it's science-based. He doesn't wonder who the manufacturer is, what they're doing, why they're doing it. He's not, as a rule of thumb, currently employed by any manufacturer. So it's
So he's totally
It's
independent.
science-based research, which is fantastic
Very factual, which I like. Not
and simple. Like
Yeah.
he
Okay.
explains things, like.
Good layman's terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've just created a device that connects into an iPad that scans the horse's back and fundamentally creates a 3D image of it.
Okay.
And it's actually not, we don't have the device here yet. I don't even think
Would
it's
be
marketable
nice.
yet.
would be nice.
Would be nice.
Pre-fit
We'll put it on the list.
before.
We'll put it on the list with the sensor pad. Okay.
I'm getting called.
Okay. Yeah.
For Christmas. But fundamentally, it's something I suggest to every
Siobhan, you were
rider.
getting cold before this.
True.
Don't worry.
So it's something I suggest to every rider that if you stand on a mounting block or a step safely, providing your horse is a logical creature
You look back.
that doesn't spook at things that move and don't move, and you look down its back, it's a really good way to start assessing your horse yourself prior to even a saddle fitting.
And seeing,
But
seeing
just as a general-
imbalances
yeah.
as well.
I mean, that's a great one. Have you ever stood behind any of them and looked down? And a lot of the time when you get them to do that, they're like,
Oh.
wow, I didn't realize that's what the horse looks like. Like it's got a dipped shoulder or a big shoulder, or it's quite wide or flat. It's quite a...
So interesting, biologically, 80% of horses are left-handed. They're more developed left. And now there's a great debate, obviously,
Why?
about this. Why? There is always a
there's
why.
many.
So fundamentally, one of the questions is it the way they lie during
the
this
womb.
The way they
gestation?
would want- yeah.
Or for the fact that we do everything off the left. We lead them off the
Everything.
left, we get on from the left. We very rarely do anything from the right. So it is a debate, but interestingly, if you play with like foals in herds, even when their mothers are to the right, if you startle them, because that's what one does when one wanders around a field,
In the name of science. Whoa.
they will run left.
Okay.
8 out of 10 of them.
Yeah.
The two weirdos run right.
Do we want? Are those the two good ones, or do we
Well, no,
avoid
it
them?
depends on what track you're racing on
Yeah,
in this
this is
country.
true. That's a
Fundamentally,
good point.
if it's a left-handed track,
Yeah.
you're a sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got those that we've got the. You said what else you're going to look at to fit a horse?
So fundamentally, what we do nowadays, measuring, since we don't quite have these gyroscope measurements yet available, is we do what we call a flexi curve, and it's a malleable piece of.
It looks a bit like
Material.
that, right?
Yeah.
But
But also different companies, depending on where you buy from, whether you buy from an English brand company or Italian, or if you even can buy them locally, they all have different things. So I have one that it almost looks like clogs stuck together that you can maneuver
Each
covered
one
in leather.
individually.
Exactly.
It looks like beaded balls.
There we go. Beaded balls covered in leather
okay.
with markings on it.
And almost as we explained it.
Yeah, I was like, if someone didn't know what that was, they've tuned off. Okay.
And you use that.
And how many places do you track at?
So
I
On the
like
back.
to do quite a lot because I then like to put it on the paper and show the person what
How
I'm
the back is
seeing.
changing from the front of the
Correct.
saddle to the back of the
So
saddle,
you often-
essentially.
For me, and I know you do this because when I came to one of your classes, you put it on shoulder,
Yeah.
behind shoulder, and it's normally like 2 to 3 fingers. I can't.
About 2 inches.
There you
apart.
go.
Okay.
In girl measurements, not boy.
Okay.
And you go all the way down, all the way to lumbar, because then you can also see how your horse is developing. Is there problems,
Absolutely.
skewness, muscle issues?
Asymmetry.
I've barely ever seen that.
So it's great to track it, and then the advantage of tracking it like that. And so the standard one is about 2 inches behind the point of the scapula,
Correct.
because that's where the gullet plate of a saddle will sit.
This part.
That part. And then you do in front of T18, which is the thoracic vertebra, which is in front of the last rib, just in front of the last rib. And then you can also map.
And English
profile.
saddles, they shouldn't go beyond that.
No,
Okay.
no. And the point of the tree should always be behind the shoulder
Okay.
when you fit. So interestingly, in your jumping saddles.
And how should the point of tree lie in relation to
Georgie was
we are
getting
going ahead? Okay,
So-
jumping saddle.
So in a jumping saddle, your point of tree, the front of the panel actually comes forward. So your knee block is
Okay.
over the shoulder, but that is all movable.
Okay.
The actual fixed part is always behind the shoulder because the scapula moves like a fan like that.
Okay. Yeah. As it leaves the arena.
Been watching too much of The Crown.
Okay. So now you've done this
You've
measurement.
done this.
Okay.
Yeah. So now the next step is, are we doing your existing saddle or are we doing a new saddle? So if we're doing your existing saddle, we're going to strip it out in terms of take everything off. We're going to take the numnahs off, the stirrup irons off, everything off, and we're going to examine the saddle. We're going to check the tree. We're going to look at the panels, see if there's any asymmetries, check the torsions left and right.
So what are you checking for? No broken tree.
Correct.
Yeah.
If the saddle has been flocked, whether it's been flocked with, if it's been flocked evenly,
Yes.
if it's okay.
So we're checking all of that and also the width of the central channel. And another thing we often look at is your stirrup leathers. And riders won't often realize this, particularly with the calfskin leathers, which are lovely. They stretch.
Yeah.
And if you are a little bit asymmetrical, you're going to weight bear more on one side than
And
the
we
other.
don't, because we don't do a left-right on,
Yeah.
we forget to
Swap
alternate.
swap the stirrups round.
And you should ideally swap your leathers every month.
Yeah. Well, and if you're cleaning your own tack, which in other parts
If
of the
you're
world you
cleaning
would
your
be the
tack.
groom. That's true.
You should
So-
clean your tack every time you use it.
Don't just remember the
No,
Pony
it's not.
Club handbook.
Yes.
Okay. So you've looked at the saddle, you've looked at the horse, you've looked at the rider.
Yes. And now we put the saddle on.
Okay. And now what are the points? What and hopefully we're giving owners, riders things to look at now as well. What should they be looking at for the saddle sitting on the horse?
Okay, so you pop the saddle on the horse, and then the first thing you check is you've got the saddle in the correct position.
And this is
And this is, again, surprisingly challenging.
yeah, okay.
So,
And
but-
again, in a country, I think that a lot of the time, the grooms who are tacking up, like overseas, we would be the grooms. But in this country, we often leave it up to staff that we haven't necessarily educated.
Yes.
And then we assume that they've put, I don't know why we would do that, but we go, well, I'm sitting in the
again,
saddle where
problem
they
is
put it.
you've got a fluffy, multicolored unicorn rainbow numnah, and you've got this pad on underneath, and you've got
And
that,
martingale and attachment.
and breastplate, and all of that. So you don't really necessarily look.
See the saddle fits us, but like, oh my God, we have to take so much off. Okay.
There
all
I
back.
No.
As the dressage rider, when I ride my jumping horses, and I've got to deattach everything
Yeah, all
when I get
the
off.
5-point martingales. Okay.
So fundamentally, what you do is there's two, I think, quick ways to do. One, if you look where the point of the tree is, there's a little pocket, and you can actually see where the point of the tree or the gullet is inserting. That must be behind the shoulder, and you can feel your way around the edge of the scapula and check that is sitting behind.
And that would be in both in any kind of saddle.
Point of tree or
Even if for the jumping saddle, you say the flap would go forward still. Okay.
The other quick cheat check is a hand behind the elbow before your girth starts. And again, obviously, there's lots of more modern girth that loop and twist and
Different angle shoulders and
Okay.
but that's a rough guide.
Yeah.
So you put your saddle on, and generally when you slide a saddle on, you'll feel it almost lock in, that it settles in behind.
Yeah. Okay, and that's the spot. Okay, so now the saddle's sitting there. It's behind the shoulder, behind the elbow.
Yes.
What's the next thing people should look for?
So I think
I would
should we
do-
start at the front?
Oh yeah, I was going to say wither clearance, both fingers and the side. A lot of us, I think, tend to forget.
So not just the top. You're
Yeah.
talking about around the wither. There should be
Correct.
space.
Can you put your fingers all the way through? Because in
Oh,
any,
of course, if they're turning, makes sense.
if you're turning sharp, and asking them to, even with dressage, asking them to really come up and do this maneuver, you need the space.
Okay.
Yeah. Then
And
then how much should it go
That's
through?
a little bit, how long is a piece of string?
No, totally.
So, if you weigh 95 kgs and you get on the saddle, you're going to drop
gonna
it
sink.
more than a person who weighs
Correct.
20. So this is where
the rider's
reference-
weight comes
and
in,
this is why it's
Gillian.
important to have the rider there.
Okay.
the regular rider.
The regular rider. And even like if your horse is being ridden by a work rider twice a week, to have them there as well.
Correct.
Again, it's a team effort. It's a holistic approach always.
Oh, totally. Okay. Out of interest, like in that situation, do you fit the saddle to the, I don't want to say the weakest rider, but do you,
You are the biggest link. Goodbye.
well, you're the weakest link. Hello.
In terms of weight, you fit it to the
You fit it more towards the
Heavier.
head.
heavier one,
Okay.
because the lighter one won't do as much.
Compression or.
correct.
Okay.
But again, there's a vast difference between if, let's say, you are a 6'4" man and your 5-year-old daughter rides the
Yeah,
horse.
no, of course.
There's going to be a lot of disparity there.
Okay.
So I think the clearance first.
Clearance down the side.
When you
But
say the
that's-
side, like where the shoulder goes?
No, either side of the wither. So a lot
Okay.
of the time you might, let's say,
Yeah.
have 2 fingers above the wither. Trying to not
So
gesture.
Siobhan said earlier, this part sits behind the shoulder,
Yeah.
right? Once that is sitting behind, generally the front part of the saddle, where your knee sits, particularly with the jumping,
Yeah.
should be mobile.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it will
So
have a
we
slide.
want to check this part. Can I put my fingers underneath? Can I get it down? Is there
Okay.
enough? And the saddle needs to sit somewhere. It's
Oh,
not
okay,
A,
so-
it's not a floating saddle.
Okay. So it's not going
So
to
coming soon.
be
would love
detached.
that.
A hover saddle.
Hover saddle.
It's going to
Okay.
be a Tesla.
Yeah. Me, Tesla, as if riding sport wasn't unaffordable enough. And then the whole way down the gullet.
Okay, so let's jump back one.
Okay.
So we'll look at the saddle a little bit externally
Okay.
before we start feeling.
Okay.
Look at the external process,
Okay.
Georgina. Before you
I just
do the
jump in for the
feelings.
feel. Go.
Don't jump in for the feel, Georgina.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we look at the balance of the saddle.
Okay.
So, i.e., does your saddle tip to the back? Does your saddle tip to the front? So
So is it going to put the rider in a...
Chair position.
So there are 2 aspects to that, and I think one of the aspects is the balance of the saddle pommel to cantle, and then the next aspect is where the seat is in the saddle.
Yeah.
So you might have a perfect pommel to cantle balance,
But it's still-
but the rider's seat is going to be dipped to the back,
In the back, okay.
and then
Great
obviously
example is dressage. Your dressage saddles are naturally higher.
Yes.
At the back
Okay.
false cantle.
versus jumping. So if you're wanting to get the perfect balance for your pommel
You're going to
canter,
fall over the fronts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think if we move on to length, and again, this is slightly a contentious issue. The fundamental is it's got to sit in front of the last rib, T18.
Okay.
There are fitters who prefer T16 because they feel there's an inference as you get closer to the lumbar spine. And there is a degree where
Okay.
part of...
Because it depends again on the horse, partly.
Yeah. So fundamentally, in part of the muscles, they change into fascia at that point.
Okay.
And that's where you can get like pressing in. And obviously, if you get pressing into the gluteal muscles and the gluteal muscles almost start
one's gonna
there,
have a great
you're going to
time.
impinge the hind
Yeah,
legs.
okay.
And then you're not going to get the hind legs coming through.
Yeah.
And obviously, you need hind legs to make a horse go forward.
Or
Pulse
a
occasionally.
vuvuzela, I'm just saying. Okay. So behind the shoulder, T16 to T18,
Yes.
depending on...
And then you start looking at the angle of the tree in relation to the angle of the horse's shoulder. So again,
Big one, yeah.
Okay.
if your horse's shoulder is like that and you put this on, it's going to push. If your horse's shoulder is like that and you put this on, it's going to sit. So your shoulder angle
Okay.
and your gullet angle,
Okay.
tree angle, should look vaguely similar at least.
Okay. So this is where people might say, I'm sure I can change the gullet, and if it's a fundamentally.
The biggest one for me is when people say I can change the gullet because you're sitting into the back or sitting into the front, but the biggest problem is you're then changing this. This, for me, this is probably just as important as if your saddle is out. Why is it out? Do we have to change the model of your saddle, or the make, the size, the style?
I suppose it's like, you listen to high performance human athletes talk about their shoes and how they pronate and anti-pronate. And it's not to say that a brand's good or bad. No. It just doesn't work for them because of their biomechanics.
100% for the combination.
And then one of the next things we do is we feel under the panel to feel that there is an evenness of pressure. So we do literally at the shoulder from the top down, and then holding the saddle at the bottom, we do from the front of the panel, we do like a wave round.
And there should just be an even, that's where you're dispersing all the weight, right? So that should be equal.
Yeah.
Don't roll your eyes.
You don't want to go up and do that, and then there's a gap.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want that even.
Smooth, okay.
You want a smooth feel. Fundamentally, the weight is distributed in the saddle, and the pressure is slightly different. But I think one of the fundamentals, and I think we both agree on this, is you need clearance of the spine on either side. And a large issue that...
Not just on top. You're talking about under where you sit, not just the weather.
The panels must sit on either side of the spine. And I think that's a fundamental issue that we find in a lot of saddles. You've got
more old-fashioned saddles, generally speaking, or is it... Am I going to get you guys into trouble? You can't get fired. You fired yourself.
My mother will still go to me, Georgie. Hi, Mom. Love you.
Okay, so people have to check, and again, depending on the horse and the breed and the conformation and the work. Okay.
I think coming back to the vertebrae, everyone thinks that is an okay size. You've got to remember you've got all the attachments that come with it.
Okay.
So to go, I've got 2 fingers all the way through is perfect. I don't need more. Yep. But you actually need, my hands are quite small, so I use my entire palm. Okay. Then I know that I'm covering ligaments, attachments, muscle attachments, etc. And I'm really not being quite close.
Okay. And that's the thing. The spine doesn't necessarily, as you've seen from the vertebra we've shown, narrow as you go down it.
No, that's really interesting. And I think it's...
And the big thing I find, particularly in like the modern warm blood sport types, but also the boerpad, the Neugedacht,
the heavier ones,
if you run your hand down their wither, you'll feel as you get to the base of the wither, which is generally speaking the narrowest part of most saddles, most horses actually expand.
I was just going to say that, and especially those boerpads, they flatten out. Yeah.
And if a saddle is not designed to encompass that, you're going to create an impingement. Because remember, when we work a horse, and for those of you who've done like bum tucks and that, where you
really good exercise.
You'll see it roll up, and you'll see that whole area expand. And then the thing you have,
it's amazing how the ribs actually, that whole thoracic thing.
It's the chain.
It's really
it's that entire muscle chain engagement. And that's what's happening every stride. Those legs are swinging under.
Unless you're blocking it, and then they can't.
Another thing to add to that is it a stallion? Is it naturally bigger there because of its testosterone?
Well, and it's development,
Is it a mare? Has she just had a foal? Because again, that same muscle will be bigger currently due to having...
And I think the thing you have to look at is, in an ideal world, a horse expands half a width fitting up during exercise. Correct. Remember, muscles retain water during exercise.
Okay.
You'll know from going to the gym so much, Georgie.
So much. Yes, of course. Tell me more about this.
Pump it.
Okay, so... We've got 20 minutes left before load shedding hits. So if you want to say anything controversial, you've got 19 minutes to wait for it.
My old friend.
Yes. And then, but a couple of points we want to touch on is while we're discussing the length, we had a question from somebody who said her horse has to go into a 16-inch. She says she has a long femur, so her knee's going over the front of the saddle and her bum's going over the back. What is the solution here? Okay.
Because your leg can be straight.
straight underneath her. Get another horse.
Yes.
Get a horse to fit the saddle.
So it is a difficult thing. And again, you know,
And does it come down to finding a model that works?
I was going to say it depends. 'Cause some models have a shorter panel underneath the seat. Some are longer, some are wider, some are thinner, and not just the gullet, the actual panel. Some you can change to have the forward cut. So you could fit into a 16-inch
plus two.
Okay.
and have the panel sitting underneath. And then you could probably get away with it. Again, it would then have to be a customized or...
So I think that's an important
And
point
that
to
comes to
raise
price
is
then.
budget. So when you go to buy your horse, budget for your saddle, please. There are also people who finance saddles. Look them up.
Okay. No, that's a really valid point. So assuming that people have a horse that can work around it, if they're buying a second-hand saddle, what are the considerations people need to know when looking at a new versus a second-hand saddle?
So I think that there's a guarantee aspect. Yeah. That is your first port of call.
Okay.
Like when you buy new, you've got a guarantee in terms of workmanship, in terms of everything. Secondhand, there are times where you don't know what's been done to the saddle.
Yeah.
So for example, with some of your...
Such as what? Okay,
Some of
like
your trees
flocking
you
or-
can stretch in terms of you heat them and you can stretch them.
Yeah.
There is often on some of those a manufacturer recommendation that you only go 2 sizes up or 2 sizes down.
And how will you know that? Is there...
Well, that's
You don't.
the challenge. Technically speaking, like I know from the society side, you should restamp the saddle.
Correct.
Really?
Correct.
Okay.
So you actually get, every saddle comes with a form of serial number. Some are yay long, some are yay long.
Okay.
And somewhere in there is your size. And every time you change it, whether it has an M, you change it to a W, or you change it to a 34, or
Okay.
because then it's really hard. I mean, some brands, we have learned to go, okay, if I do this and I measure, I know that is a medium, a 33, so that must mean it must be slightly wider. And you can kind of guesstimate where it's at. But also you've got other things like, has the saddle been,
In a full.
panel been taken completely off, been put back on correctly?
What has it been flocked with?
Yeah,
What is it?
Has it been in a fall? You know,
Yeah.
like any
Yes,
of
yeah.
that.
there
Has it dropped
breakage?
off the stable door more than
Yeah.
once?
Okay.
And also,
that's
like,
an
where and
interesting-
how it's been stored. You know what I mean? Like,
How
often,
much does heat make, like I hear about these heating machines, we put the saddles on and
they
then...
run hot.
Okay.
No, they-
Have you been in a South African tack room in the last
No,
week?
that's still not hot.
Oh,
No.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So does that not have an
So,
impact?
Particularly with the more modern carbon saddles that are heat adjusted. They are really hot, and it's directly on a spot to change a specific area.
You cannot put it in the microwave and make it change.
Please
There are
don't.
too many metal parts. So just before anyone, like,
Or the oven.
yes.
And how? But for example, if you've changed something from a medium to a wide, can you change it back to a medium? And how many times can you repeat that
That
process?
depends on the brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Depends
And you
on-
won't know. You won't, like if you're
In an
buying a
ideal
second-hand
world, you
saddle.
would.
In an
Okay.
ideal world, I know that I've picked up this saddle and it can do as much as it wants to do. But I could also pick up another brand and say, oh, it's only allowed 2. I don't know how many times it's done it.
Okay.
Or who
Okay.
has said what. And now, is there strain on the tree? Is there a crack that you cannot see? So now you've gone and you've ridden and the next minute it keeps collapsing.
Okay.
It's a tough one.
And you talk about storing a saddle. Are you talking about what the saddle sleeps on for the other
Yes.
23 hours a day? And what is the ideal?
Something that won't influence the panels. Like
Okay.
a lot of the time, saddle racks are not great, or saddles are stored on top of each other, and the one at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Has a tough
the
time.
saddle rack that has a thing like that is probably one of my least favorites, because you put
What, the triangle one or?
the metal triangle one,
Okay.
because you're then affecting this part of the panel, not
Yeah,
the
but
rest.
And it
they're
depends
not-
on what you're storing on top of it.
Well,
you know what I mean?
if you're storing a very narrow saddle, it's going to gradually stretch it a little bit wider. No?
Maybe
Okay.
not, depends on
Okay.
the model.
You know, but if you've got like the rails on the saddle rack, they can press into the panels, as an example. Like let's do that. So for 23 hours a day, it's getting striations through it,
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
and
Yeah.
you're influencing the
So
flocking.
personally, what's your favorite way to store a saddle?
On a round pole, I would say. I don't know. I've not really.
So I quite like Contrary to you, I actually
Really?
quite like the flatter ones because it's a smooth base for the saddle.
But the angle has to be correct. Because different people make them. So you can buy it from a guy who makes it at the correct angle, that is wide enough. And
There are
it's the
some
correct
lovely wooden ones that are being made.
I love the wooden ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
The pole ones I like, but then you find that it does a lot of damage to the front of the
And it also
saddle.
depends on how they get chucked on. And with if they've got the numnah underneath them and they're soaking up sweat for the remaining hours, and how often you wash your numnah and your girths and all of that.
We've got a question about treeless saddles. Treeless saddles, like fad or fabulous?
I don't
or?
have much experience with them. I think they do have their place.
I think everything in horses, it's
has
a
a
recurring theme on the podcast.
I mean, even if you
that
find
there's something for there's something for everyone.
Exactly.
And I think that really is the thing about horses, is that we'll find something that contradicts the rule.
Correct.
Let's discuss the add-ons that can affect a saddle and help or hinder riders, and we often put them on without necessarily thinking about it. Girths, pads, and numnahs.
I have a thing about girths.
You started that with a bit of PT. You were like, okay.
Something I've learned is every saddle fitter has their
Favorite.
faves.
Elastic versus not elastic
Not even
versus.
girthing, just in general. Like, I like looking at feet and hips. Someone else might look at just shoulders. Someone else might look at the whole thing. So comes back to tack as well. Some people are very focused on just the saddle, on pads, on irons, girths. I have a thing about girths because if it's too long or too short, I mean, for me, it's kind of common. If it's too short, it's going to hit into the elbow. And then you've got the buckle that
And then you
keeps
also end up
backing.
affecting the abdominal muscles.
Okay.
So
Charles Christie actually did ask this earlier on this week, where for a dressage girth specifically versus a jumping girth is the ideal place for it to sit.
Dressage is wide as part of the thorax.
Okay.
and you also
Go find a bumblebee and play
Yeah,
with it.
yeah.
jumping, because it's under your leg quite a bit, you don't want it also too high to affect rider as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But you don't
You
want
get it right under your thigh.
Yeah, you also don't want it too low because then you're affecting
The calf.
correct. And also you can affect the horse's
And
muscles.
also, like, too low, you're going to hit into the latissimus.
Correct. So it's a bit of a tough one. And again, every model of saddle takes a different type of girth.
Okay.
So some have shorter billets, some have longer billets. Maybe you get a jumping saddle.
Maybe you put a fluffy pad on.
that is
Maybe.
that is an eventing saddle that has dressage.
So I was actually just going to ask you about that. I've seen now it's become quite, and it's a very short, very broad girth
Yeah.
that they're using
So the broadness is designed across the pectoral muscles that
to relieve
distributes the
pressure. Okay.
And there are many girths out there. I mean, I know there's a donut girth. I know there's wavy girths. There's not wavy girths, elastic. I personally like either both elastic or both nothing on either side. I come back to wearing a bra. If I wear a bra, I want.
I mean, that's the great
It's a
correlation.
wonderful correlation.
I don't want one.
There is a man blushing at
One
that
side
end of the table, I'm just going to
elasticated.
tell you.
Can I turn the camera around quickly?
Yeah, I wouldn't want
Okay.
one side to be elasticated and the other side not to.
Yeah.
You know how uncomfortable
What
is that?
breastfeeding does to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Then there's, I think we had 14 viewers. I think we've got one left. Yeah. Someone actually did leave. Oh, goodbye. 14th viewer. Okay, so good. And again, so it depends on the biomechanics of the horse, the rider, the saddle, and it's great to have so many options, but it's about finding the option that will work with it.
Combination horse saddle combo.
With an ideal fitting saddle, what kind of numnah should people be using underneath that? Because I see you get a lot of these beautiful, and they look lovely, these padded numnahs. And I don't know if you've ever been hiking with a too thick sock on. It'll ruin your life.
It's horrible.
Okay? It'll ruin everyone else's life because you'll make it ruin their life.
Like, what was wrong with
Choose better boyfriends.
Right, okay.
Okay. So numnahs, like what should people, if your saddle fits?
Personal preference,
Might be agreeing with you.
I like natural material.
Correct.
At the
Okay.
end of the day. And like for me, there are
Simple.
numnahs that are made with the sheepskin underneath that mitigate the need for a half pad. Half pads being put on can do some fascinating things,
Okay.
like backwards, forwards, sideways.
I had someone where you come out with a riser pad on
Yes.
back to front the one
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
He was like,
Yeah.
it doesn't look right. No.
Yeah.
No. So I love the plain, simple numnahs with the sheepskin underneath, the sheepskin and natural
It
sheepskin.
wicks sweat
wicks.
away, actually. Okay.
And you don't always necessarily have to have the sheepskin, but then have it natural.
Cotton.
Okay.
Cotton. Don't have this silky, shiny.
It's very pretty.
Okay. Okay. So check what's underneath, what's actually touching your horse.
And a big one on numnahs is the shape of the top.
It should
Yes,
look
that's
like the shape
actually-
of a horse.
oh,
It should
that's
look
really
like
lovely.
the shape of a horse. It should have
Yeah.
a high width. If you have, and you know you have a high wither, you should have a high wither numnah. Or if you're going to go for all the pads and the gadget, high wither. Because if it's straight, you're just going to have the pull down.
Compression.
And then your saddle is going to cause issues. And you just have
Okay.
other issues because of a numnah.
We have 8 minutes left. And with the discussion about heat under the saddle, let's talk about both of your favorites, sweat patches. So sweat patches, what do they mean? You hear some people say, oh, the horse is sweaty there, it's sore. No, it's dry there. No, it's sore. No.
So it is probably like one of the most contentious issues in saddle.
Oh, is it? Okay. Throughout saddle fitting?
Yeah,
Okay.
fundamentally, and people have varying opinions.
Okay.
Fundamentally, so I think if you look at it in the sense of a horse has sweat glands, like a human has sweat glands, the main sweat glands are on the side of the horse. So when it's running through the plains, escaping a
cool down.
lion, or running away in its paddock.
I think I ride a few of those actually.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
That the wind will blow across and cool the horse rapidly. So horses sweat in order to cool, same as we do. So if I go running, anyone who's seen me run, particularly those who saw me running, yes,
You'll usually see a child like 20 meters ahead of her.
yes,
you know?
that's the only way Siobhan runs. So when I run, first place I sweat is under my arms. So you sweat where you've predominantly got your sweat glands. So a horse, it's on its neck, it's on its flanks, but on the lower side of its flanks. They sweat at the broader part of their bellies. They sweat less towards the spine.
Okay.
And you'll know if you run, when you're wearing a t-shirt or anything like that, the place you sweat most is not where the t-shirt is touching, it's more your back. So your under your arms and back.
That's true. Okay.
So that's
where
the
there's
best
air.
way to do an analogy to it.
Okay.
So fundamentally, in order for there to be a vast quantity of sweat or more sweat, you're landing up with movement and airflow. So particularly towards the front of the saddle with your scapula, moving forward, and you're getting your airflow coming towards the front of the saddle, and then the back towards the lumbar region, where you're getting, again, the movement to the back, we hope, and airflow across the back. You're going to get a lot of sweat. But then
And also maybe movement of hair.
yeah.
Okay.
But you're going to hit a patch a little bit under the saddle towards the stirrup bar, where the saddle is a little more static. We don't have a hover saddle yet. I don't know if I want to ride in one of those because I'm not sure I'm going to stay on.
So will there always be a bit more pressure or stability under the stirrup bar?
So again,
Stability.
there's more
yeah.
stability.
Okay.
If you are hitting a fundamental dry spot,
Okay.
and I'm talking bone dry, and sometimes with a disturbance of the hair, or you're starting to pick up white hairs.
Correct.
And again, this is not your horse is getting white hairs across its entire body because it's now 482 in the
And
head.
also if your horse doesn't normally sweat and then sweats, or does sweat and then doesn't, like those
So it
are
also comes down to horsemanship and knowing your horse.
And also how you ride. Have you been doing light seat the entire session?
have you brought something
Okay.
new into the work?
Okay.
But it's an indication, but there should always be sweat. So if you're dealing with bone dry, there may be an issue, and then you look at it and you evaluate it.
I suppose the biggest thing with sweat marks is symmetry, or like
Yes
is that
and
a
no,
thing?
but I've
Okay,
never seen
no.
a symmetrical horse.
If
That's a good point.
80% of the horses are not symmetrical and one side is bigger, you might not necessarily have the same sweat marks or lack of
And you
sweat
hope if your
marks.
horse is left-handed, you're right-handed.
Yeah, for a perfect world.
Yes,
That's how it's going to work out.
World peace, utopia.
Anthony Ward has come in here and he wants to know if his polo cross saddle will fit all his horses, including his dressage horse. Ha ha ha. Anthony, that's very rude. We're very nice to you on your podcast. You're going to
Yes.
have to come back here.
Yes, I think you should make him.
Okay, so if we're saying good,
And Ward, no, your polo cross saddle doesn't fit. FYI.
so if we're giving people some go-aways from this talk, and this is very, very beginner stuff, we're really talking about have a look at your horse, consider yourself, have a look at your saddle and then
I
look
think
at
a little
these
bit of
fit points.
introspection is good for a lot of people. At the end of it, I think that is your fundamental start. Have a look at yourself as a rider. Be the rider your horse wants you to be, not who you think you are.
Correct.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lovely, have you seen there's that, I think it's a bumper sticker, it says, be the person your dog thinks you are.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's a slightly gentler version, you know, of flocking. Last thing, what can saddles be flocked with and what should people be aware of when it comes to flocking?
I think people should know what their saddle.
So flocking is what goes in
Has
the paddles
or
on the saddle. I think we
Just
should
be
start
Okay,
with that.
let's go back.
These are golf guys who run the podcast. Don't judge their faces.
Okay, so
They have no idea what's going
you've
on.
got the panel. You want to know what is in that panel. What is this leather thing that is sitting between the horse and the tree, and what is inside it? Yeah, you get different stuff.
So I think startup, a lot of the panels these days are lined.
Yeah,
They're lined with
become
shock
lined.
absorption
Correct.
material
Okay.
Yeah.
in the modern saddles.
That's lovely.
To mitigate pressure, to distribute all of that. So I think that's what's happening now.
Can you flock things with better things and worse things? Are you looking at quality of flocking material, basically?
So fundamentally, you can, in a panel, you can have air, you can have foam, you can have a combination,
Foam panels you can't adjust.
Yes.
Okay.
and you can have wool, and you can have synthetic wool, and you can have real wool.
Okay.
And all of them have their advantages and their disadvantages.
And all brands come with different things.
And
Should you always try to stay true? If you've got a saddle that's got genuine wool flocking,
stay with genuine wool.
stay with
Stay with
genuine
it.
wool.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to always flock with the material that the saddle contains.
Okay.
So if it's got a synthetic fiber in it, you'd like to go with synthetic. If it's got wool in it, you'd like to go with wool. If you're using a yellow long fiber natural wool, you can fundamentally blend it.
Okay.
But if you start mixing materials,
If you start putting feathers in, you're going to upset someone.
I have actually seen the old size saddles had feathers in.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Are those the ones that feel like wood now that it's 30 years later?
Yes.
But if you've, yeah,
Yes.
can't be
But
very
it's still
comfortable.
here,
It's still
going
here.
strong, feather down.
Yeah. Thank you both. Is there anything else either of you want to add to that before load shedding ends our party abruptly?
I was going to hope to wait for load shedding to abruptly.
End it all.
But no, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. For everyone who was listening, who missed out on an opportunity to ask a question, a great episode, ladies. Thank you from Jimmy Boy. Interesting. That could be either one of your friends. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This was the 10th episode of the SAEF podcast From the Horse's Mouth. You can join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m., where we have a variety of experts on talking about a variety of interesting things. Next week, we will be having a vet from out of town talking to us about deworming. So please be sure to join us for that. Otherwise, thank you for joining us tonight. Saddle up for success with all the advice we've given you, and we'll see you next week.